Today, the session will be about soft skills behaviors. Sometimes when we think about innovation, we immediately think about new technologies. But as we heard in the first day, last Tuesday, innovation can be everywhere, in processes, in everything. But how we nurture that innovation in our organizations and within ourselves. So I heard from a professor of design thinking of a US university that in her experience, the highest payoffs in innovation are on how people work together, on how we implement possibilities, the possibilities that people see in the midst of organization bureaucracy or risk aversion or something. And that's why Women in Nuclear Innovation thought these topics were very important to be covered in the training. So as part of the training, we include the topic of challenging the status quo, the traits of an innovation mindset. For that topic, we're going to have Emma Wong. She's a senior nuclear technology and innovation advisor in the Division of Nuclear Technology Development and Economics of the OECD Nuclear Energy Agency, where she's focused on small modular reactor strategy and innovation. In addition to that, she's second from EPRI, Electric Power Research Institute, where she's the European lead for nuclear strategy, innovation and development. And we also have Rod Dowler, that is the National Education and Engagement Manager from ANSTO. Rod specializes in brand management, marketing, communication, having worked with large Australian corporates and many events. And he manages the ANSTO Discovery Center, which has built a comprehensive national education program in the last 10 years. So I want to welcome Emma and Rod. Thank you very much for being with us today. And I'll give the floor to you both.
Great. Thank you, Alice. And that was a great tee up. Now let's just make sure that technology works and I can actually share my screen. Hope this works. Okay. All right, Alice, tell me if this is working and you can see my slides.
Yes, I can.
Perfect. So when Alice and Florencia came to me and asked about, what are we going to talk about? And we wanted to focus a lot on innovation behaviors. This topic, there's a lot of things that could be covered here. So I picked a few things to kind of have us as a group think about, and then Rod will add more to this after my short presentation. So when you're in your innovation teams, or maybe you've even just seen other innovation teams, do they look like this? Or would you even want them to look like this? So if you're going to do something on nuclear innovation, do you just want, the programmers in the room by themselves looking at a screen? Is this what you want your innovation team to look like? Or do you just want, lab scientists around, these looking and doing experiments like this? Is this what you want an innovation team to look like? Or do you want, just the MBAs walking around and doing all the innovation themselves? They're out here just chatting. Is this kind of what you want your innovation team to look like? I know for me personally, I would love to get all of them into the room together, and that would be my innovation team, of course, with others and some financial and things. And that brings me to that in innovation teams, diverse perspectives are always needed. It's not just gender balance. It's not just all of the different experience levels. It's all of also the different technical areas, the finance areas, looking at supply chain, construction. So when you're thinking about innovation, think broadly about who and what behaviors you want to see in these teams to get the best possible answer you can get. And maybe there's not even just one answer, there's answers from different perspectives. I'm not just saying this just based on experience, but there have been studies that diversity really does have a business line impact. So when you think about diversity, just think about the environments that you would like to create. And you can see internally, if you have a diverse internal teams, you see a lot of happy employees. They have reported, higher levels of satisfaction, trust, more engagement because they're challenging each other to think differently. There's psychological safety because you can, and then also retention because you feel like you're contributing and you have this diversity to explore. They've also seen, if you're willing to just look at the business line as is. Are
you?
Oh, I'm sorry. If everyone could please go on mute, that would be great. And you can also see that you can also see a higher revenue due to this type of innovation with diverse groups. You are sometimes you might think you may not innovate at a faster rate, but you're innovating at a rate where you're probably can consider all of the different risks that could be in your project, looking at the future more broadly, looking at the past and reviewing lessons learned. So you could actually innovate at a faster rate and be more diverse and broad and more inclusive. Externally, a diverse team can also lead to better understanding of your customer base, because hopefully in your team, you have people that may be in the industry or the customer base that you're looking at for whatever innovation you're looking for. It has been shown in different surveys that diverse companies do perform better. They do drive better results, and that outward appearance will then also reflect your own values for outside and inside your company. And so, well, when you want to look at innovation behaviors, I picked out this book here. You can read this on your own, Eat, Sleep, Innovate. But there are many different behaviors that you can try to adopt, right? This is a training. So these are some of the behaviors that I have picked out. It shows, some of the things you can do and the things you need to think about in your groups if you want to try to promote this challenging the status quo. Think about your customer. How could you collaborate better? How do you build that team? These are a lot of tips that could be very useful when you're thinking about innovation and moving forward. I will be honest, sometimes when I am deep into innovation, these don't always come up top of mind. So having a little sheet like this, if you just have it handy, you look at it every once in a while, can give you a trigger to be like, oh yes, I need to keep this open mind. I need to ask questions. I need to ask, how can we learn more about this? Do I have the right people on my team, or do I need to engage others to try to give me a broader perspective? And maybe, like here in empowerment, maybe I do need to speak up when I'm like, well, maybe we need to pivot and change the way we're thinking because this right now isn't working the way we need it to. I believe these slides will be provided to you. So this is just a snapshot. If you want to learn more, please read the book. It will be interesting. So I was also asked to kind of look at it from a balanced gender perspective, looking at this a little more closely. This report was issued and published by the NEA a few months ago. It's the first look with a lot of different metrics and a lot of different international data behind it. And it has a kind of a look at what are some of the policy frameworks and recommendations when looking at gender balance in the nuclear sector. The report can be downloaded and read on your own time. And I'll go over some of the key points here for you to consider. So when you're looking at gender balance, this is women in nuclear, we're maybe a quarter of the industry here, and even less in the STEM roles. What that means for diversity is if you want to promote diversity in all ways, there needs to be a conscious effort to try to see how we can create more of a gender balance in many of the different areas. And with that in mind, we can see here from the data that was actually curated and analyzed, you can see that there's a good number of new hires that are coming in as women. It's a greater percentage than is retained, right? So I looked on the last slide, there was only a quarter of the whole industry women. And we're seeing here about 28.8% of new hires are women. So there's an attrition of of the women in nuclear. So it shows, though, when we have taken the data and we look through the data at the NEA, that there is an attrition rate, and it tends to leak early in their careers. So it's something to think about. And as we go through, the NEA had gone through and put together this framework to be considered. It's how do you attract, a more gender balance? How do you then retain, because they saw this evidence of leaking early, and then how do you advance them into different roles? This is important because if you have all of, say, one type of role, all of management, upper management, all technical, even all of support staff of all of one gender, are you really going to have that diverse thinking in order to innovate? Who is going to say something differently from that, the gender perspective, right? A lot of women aren't as strong as men, so maybe there's an aspect of that should and can be considered in whatever innovation you're looking at, and vice versa, right? So we do want to have that gender balance. And what was interesting that I found in a lot of this framework is that there is this effort to try to put some metrics behind this. It is shown that if you put metrics behind an initiative, therefore there's something to track, something to see, there would be a greater effort to try to meet a metric. And so I find this interesting because it's one of the first times that a lot of there's been a global initiative to put metrics behind this and try to track this type of data. And so just to kind of conclude, there is a shift underway demographically. We do need to keep an eye on it, and especially on the retention of trying to keep that gender balance, and come up with some ideas to try to maintain that. As I had just talked about, diversity in all ways is kind of key to having faster innovation. So if we want to really keep these innovation teams as fast as possible, as profitable as possible, it kind of is on top of mind to make sure that there is diversity in many different facets. Of course, you can download the report at your leisure. And with that, I think minutes for questions. And since I'm sharing, I can't see if there are any questions. Okay, if there are no questions, then I'll pass it to Rod.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Sure, yes, of course.
At least we can hear you.
Oh, okay. My name is Jenny. I wanted to thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask you, what was the major reason for the attrition from the study? I haven't read it before.
A lot of the different reasons is there's the leaking early. A lot of it comes from family obligations. Mm-hmm. So if you think about women, a lot of times they want to take some time off to spend time with more family, and due to that, usually they'll leave the industry. However, in personal experience, I've had a lot of friends leave the industry, but then there's no incentive to come back, right? It's very difficult because there's a learning curve, there's this and that. And I'm a little bit older, I may not look at, but there were no support systems either to try to keep them from just outright leaving. Nowadays, I have seen a lot of different programs to try to retain women, to keep them working so you don't lose that leakage factor, to try to keep them along with, I guess, the company, support them with their family obligations, and with that support, they're able to maintain, and that leakage doesn't happen as much. it is more of a personal choice. I will say it's not just for women. Some men also make that choice, but it's less common.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions really quickly?
Hey Emma, I'm Davy here. So since we are talking about soft skills and leadership and gender balance, right? There are scenarios where we see when there's a female leader who's leading a group of male group mates. There is a kind of stereotype where they can't take a direction from a female leader. So how do we tackle that kind of scenario? How do we make sure that our voice has the strength in that kind of environment?
That's a very good question. It may also depend on the environment that you're in. It will be a different situation if you're at a power plant versus if you're at a research institution or if you're at an academic situation. The advice I can give you is that hopefully you have some mentorship or some support for your leadership from other managers in your organization. I have found when I was in a leadership position, I had to rely on a lot of the other leaders to help advise kind of those situations. I have also taken a lot of leadership classes to help with, how do you deal with these type of situations? It's always on a case-by-case basis. I would also advise that with softer skills like this, it may also be how you approach each different person. It's hard to have an overall advice on how do you, lead a group of males because it may all depend. If they're all engineers and you are not an engineer, you may have to learn to speak their language, right? Like, how do you approach this type of person? However, if they're all maybe programmers, computer programmers, then you have to learn how to approach them where they are and speak their language. A lot of times I find it's that you're not speaking their language. It's all very situationally dependent. And I don't know, Rod, if you have any advice for this, to me, it's very situational on how you would approach the situation.
So Emma, I might jump in if that's okay. And this is one little tactic that we've used at my workplace, and it's been driven by a male CEO, but he implemented at the start of any large meeting, let's say more than 8 people, that the expectations is that everyone in that meeting is contributing and that he doesn't want to hear the same person interrupting, giving their points of view. And you mentioned before that men can be quite dominant in these types of situations, and that can lead, speaking in stereotypes here, that women may not be contributing in these discussions because they're being dominated by men. This simple, tactic of the expectation that everyone is contributing in the meeting has very much led to, I think, a lot of people that have been quiet in past meetings actually getting their views and their ideas expressed. I think for men, it actually makes you, the first few times that you go through these meetings, it makes you realise just how much you do talk. And that means you're probably not listening enough as well too. So it's quite transformative, I think, for organisations. For men, for me, it was an eye-opener. I have certainly changed my style. I will be trying to sit back and listen more and more. Doesn't come naturally, but it certainly has been something that's worked, I think. There's many, many things that need to happen, and this is only one of them, but it's something that I'd suggest that it might work at your organisation.
Thank you very much, Emma and Rod. That was very informative.
Okay, great. I think we'll pass it to Rod now, and we may have time at the end of this session to do more questions for me.
Okay, thank you very much, Emma. That was great. Loved hearing your stats there and some of those tips. And both of us have been asked to talk about challenging the status quo. So this is very much looking at that innovation mindset. And I think because we're all in the nuclear industry, that generally we're working with a bunch of people that are risk averse, that you're looking at people that quite conservative in their thinking, probably very logical, trained to be that way, follow a scientific process or think like an engineer. So creativity is almost something that isn't promoted in these types of professions. And that means that you do find that opportunities are missed because there's just not enough creative thinkers in these types of groups. So my presentation today, I'm going to talk a little bit very quickly about ANSTO, and that's because we always have to have a couple of slides about the organisation where we work. So I'll fly through those. I'm going to talk a little bit about the perceptions of nuclear in Australia, and that's because we've used design thinking processes in my area, which is looking at the education and communication of nuclear in Australia, used design thinking to come up with some interesting concepts. And I think that it's a really good area. We all end up communicating nuclear at some stage. So there might be something in it for you with some of the end results that we've achieved in Australia. So about ANSTO, Australian Nuclear Science and Technology Organisation. So we're the government agency for nuclear in Australia. And it's around about 1,300 employees, 6,000 scientific users using our infrastructure, over $1 billion, and probably the most well-known infrastructure that we have is the Opal research reactor. So an open pool reactor, 20 megawatts, and very highly regarded around the world for being highly efficient and also multi-purpose. So the Opal reactor works very, very hard for us. It allows us to produce a whole bunch of nuclear medicines, allows us to irradiate a lot of silicon, but also has quite an impressive suite of neutron scattering instruments attached to it as well too. So in that sense, ANSTO very much recognised as one of the global producers of molybdenum-99. So somewhere about 20 to 30% of the world's market share. We do a lot of research in minerals. So these days is looking at things like rare earth minerals and lithium and some of these other really highly desired commodities that will be needed for the transformation into a non-carbon future. We are irradiating about 50% of a certain type of silicon ingot, again, very important for the renewable sector. And we also do a lot of education. So part of the reason why I've been invited to present tonight is because ANSTO works quite closely with a number of international bodies like the IAEA to deliver courses on communication and education. So perceptions of nuclear in Australia, I'm going to ask you to very quickly put something in the chat. When I say the word nuclear, can you give me a word back if possible? Now I'm expecting some good comments from this audience. Can see atoms, thank you. Anyone else want to put in a word there? Lots of power, clean power, loving that. If only I could get these types of words from the majority of Australians, because their perception of nuclear isn't quite as, well, I would say encouraging as your words. We're talking about nuclear where the majority of Australians are not in favour of especially nuclear energy. And that's probably been driven by the fact that we've had alternatives, mainly fossil fuels, for energy production for several decades now. But if I had to summarise it, we're talking about people saying it's unsafe, harmful for the environment, and don't trust it. I'm sure you've had similar sort of thoughts before, but I think in Australia, it's probably even more negative than in most countries that I've experienced around the world. And the problem here is that these are perceptions. And, you know, you've probably heard that phrase before, perception is reality. Or if I want to quote Albert here, he's put it slightly differently, saying that reality is an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. So it doesn't really matter in people's minds if this is correct or not. If this is what they believe, then this is what you have to work with. But we found, especially with the local communities around our campuses in Australia, that you can turn around these perceptions, but it takes a long time, takes a lot of effort. It's a little bit trying to turn course on one of these big boats here. So when we're looking at the perception of nuclear, we've got people that are very against it down on the left-hand side of the screen. You've got people that are very positive for it as well too. And I must say that there are a lot more people that are supportive of nuclear energy in Australia these days than what there has been in the past. We don't tend to worry about the two groups that are on the edges. We very much trying to look at that middle ground, the people that, if they get the right amount of information, if they get the nice experiences from ANSTO, if they learn to trust us as an organisation, that we can actually turn them into someone that sits in that positive camp. And it is very much like building a bridge for these people, so that they go from intolerance or misinformation or no information into something that is tolerant of what we're doing because they have the correct information. So for us, very important that we build trust with our communities, that we get them to know us and why the things that we do with nuclear science and technology is very important, so we can start to shift their perceptions. We also work very hard to build up the information in certain key stakeholders in the community so that they can be advocates for us. Very powerful to have, you know, non-nuclear people out there talking about the benefits of your organisation and what you're doing. And this community support is, you know, a snowball effect. It's once you start getting a few people that talk about the positive aspects of what you're doing, you'll get more and more that join them. So design thinking processes, and I'm not going to talk about, you know, design thinking. There's a number of different types of models out there. I'm going to show you one that we use. So ANSTO has an affiliation with the Design Factory, which is a spin-off of Ideas Squared, which was originated from CERN. So we're a part of a global network of organisations. There's, I think, 32 these days around the world that we share design thinking concepts. We meet up and we talk about the latest and the greatest in this area. But when we're talking about design thinking, this is very simply just looking at ideas of making something new. Quite often, when you're talking about design thinking, it'll be a product or an app, but it can be some sort of an idea. When you're talking about creating ideas, you're talking about design innovation. Three main components. So you have to make something, an idea that is feasible, so scientifically, technologically feasible. You have to also talk about viability. So does it make sense? Am I creating an idea that can be put into practice? Can it be implemented into a business? And I guess nuclear agencies, feasibility and viability are probably things that we do reasonably well. I think the area that we tend to lack is desirability. So when we're trying to go out, we're not necessarily bringing, I guess, our key stakeholders along with us. Some cases, if you're, you know, creating products using nuclear science and technology, whether we are actually bringing people with us, asking them what they want, and are we building something that they're going to need and pay for. So design thinking, we're very much looking at 5 steps here. And design thinking, this is a technique. Like I said before, there's so many of them out there, and I don't think it really matters which one that you take. This is the one that we use. Design thinking, I would describe, it's a bit of a methodology, but more importantly, it's a mindset. It is trying to be more creative and looking at opportunities when you can use this creativity. So the very first step is understanding your end user and their experiences. The second step is trying to uncover root problems. Third one is challenging assumptions, brainstorming and coming up with creative ideas that could potentially solve that problem. Fourth step is you're starting to build and test that idea. So that might be in some cases building a prototype. And then the fifth one is your solution. So you actually got it and you're starting to use it with the end user or the stakeholder. Now that looks like a 5-stage process. You would think you go from a problem to a solution, but design thinking is never like that. It's more like this. And it's messy and it's uncomfortable and it's meant to be this way because we work in an industry, we work with engineers, we work with scientists. Many of us have this type of background. We've been taught to learn this scientific process, and this is fantastic for one part, so the feasibility of the 3-circle model that I showed you earlier, but it is quite often going to miss that end user problem. So what that could mean in this particular case, if we go back to the 1920s, 1930s, Henry Ford said, if we asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. We need to actually dig deeper into the problems that we're trying to solve, not just ask people. We need to understand their wants and needs and how we can actually give them something that they don't even know that they want. I'm going to share also a couple of the models that we use. So this is Team Spectrum, which is for innovation. We have 7 categories that we look for, and we have these 7 categories, 4 of them on the screen at the moment. We actually cut up these categories into cards. We sit down with teams, we ask people to actually rank what they think is their strengths down to their weaknesses. And then we just quickly have a bit of a look to see if we've got diversity in design thinking or creative thinking across the team. So we're looking for the researcher, which I think is fairly self-explanatory, the creative person, the makers, possibly your engineers. We're also looking for the perfectionist, that person there that can get into the detail to make sure that your ideas are actually going to be thought through thoroughly. Of course, you always need your communicators, you need your provocateurs, so people that are going to be more of the risk takers and the ones that will, I guess, disrupt if need to. And then you also need your mediators as well too, so people that can make, I guess, some of these diverse personalities in the team work. So you want an element of all 7 of these characteristics in your team, and I've got a little PDF with these as separate little cards. Happy to share them. Encourage you to, if you've got a team, sit down and just do the exercise. It doesn't take very long at all, but it'll actually make you aware if you're a little heavy in a certain area and you don't have many capabilities in some of these other soft skills. Last slide in terms of design thinking is we kind of are guided by 5 rules so we've picked up from this design factory, this global network. And the very first one, safety. We work in the nuclear industry, so we're all guided making sure that everything we do is safe and secure. And that's totally reasonable. I mean, you do not want a reactor operator that is operating anything but safe and securely. But there's areas where you can take risks, you can explore, you can fail and fail quickly, so you learn quickly so that you can innovate and be creative. And the problem is that a safety culture in most nuclear industries is very, very strong and dominant, so much so that people feel like they can't take risks and fail in those non-core nuclear areas. So we find that this is one of the biggest hurdles that we have with design thinking and innovation within our organisation, is just that people are being trained not to take that risk. Seems a little counterintuitive, but it is something that we have to work on, that people are responsible for their actions. They need to understand when they can and they can't take risks. We very much ask people to get out there and just talk and listen to different people as much as possible, and do this with the mindset that everyone can have a contribution here. A little bit like I was saying with those meetings before, that all people have potential. And even if you think that they're in a division or even a personality type that you normally don't want to work with, it is still worth the time to actually build that relationship, because they will have some value that they can bring into this creative design thinking process if you stick with them. So what does that mean in terms of our communication, education and outreach programs at ANSTO? And I'll just give you a few examples here. So we very much have identified through going through these processes that, the general public and our customers and our other stakeholders want more access to ANSTO. So the best thing that we can do is actually show them around our facilities. So we do lots of tours. We do about 700 tours of our facilities each year, around about 20,000 people. And that's fantastic in terms of like getting someone who doesn't understand or doesn't appreciate, has misperceptions about ANSTO, to get them to be feeling more favourable about the organisation afterwards. That's 20,000 people in a country of Australia with 26 million. So we've had to broaden it out more than that. And we have used technology in this sense. So we have developed an app, which is called ANSTO XR. It's got a few different components on it, but you can see on the right here that you can download it, and you can find this on Google Play or on the Apple App Store. That you can play this just as a general 2D video. But if you can get your hands on one of these cardboard headsets, you can turn it into a 3D experience. With that app, very authentic, gets you 5 minutes walking around the reactor, understanding the benefits that it delivers and how safe that it is operated as well too. But inside of that app, we've also put in some other elements, periodic tables. So of course it's very close to a nuclear professional's heart, but not necessarily talking exactly about what we're doing in a lot of cases. But we've created an augmented reality periodic table with 20 elements that you can wave your phone over the top once you've got the app open, and it will tell you about 20 different elements and how we will have some sort of a connection through to it. So we've also, over the last 10 years, played around with a few little games as well too. So one here called Elementals, which is a periodic puzzle game, but another one here called Half-Life Heroes, where you get to be a doctor, come into our reactor, order nuclear medicines that are decaying very quickly. So you've got to make them go through a little gaming process to make the medicine and get them out to hospitals before they decay. So very much driven by, what can we do to get people that aren't interested in nuclear science actually having a look at what we're doing. And that was very much going through a design thinking process, the core to what we needed to do. So I speak to a lot of nuclear agencies around the world about their education programs. They tend to be very traditionally talking about things like radiation and health physicists and trying to operate a reactor. And I'm not convinced that too many people in the general public are that interested in those types of topics. But if you can find out what they're interested in and give them some of that content, you can generally weave in nuclear science into it. So that's very much what we've done with our local community, which means crazy things like me here dressing up as Dr. Evil from the Austin Power movies to deliver a show called Fact or Fiction, where we look at popular sci-fi films. We decide whether what we're looking at is fact or fiction, or there's degrees, more fact than fiction, different types of voting options. And then I will have a nuclear scientist come and talk about the particular application. So it might be, looking at whether a lightsaber is fact or fiction. And so, can nuclear science help us to get to the part where one day we might have a lightsaber? Very, very popular, gets the word out about our organisation. We do lots around just talking about technology as well too. So lots of presentations which are called Future Vision, which is just looking at the really interesting parts of science and, again, linking it back into what we're doing constantly. We go out and we bring lots of kids into our facility to do STEM-type workshops. And what we find in this particular case is that we don't talk that much about nuclear science, but all of a sudden we're winning over mums and dads because we're giving a really good education to their kids. That's what they really care about at the end of the day. Everyone cares about their family. So this then allows us to build a relationship with the parents who generally weren't that interested in us. It allows them to come and do a tour with us. It allows us to talk and get them on side. One day those kids, though, do end up growing up and they hopefully have had enough of a STEM experience to come and work for us or another science agency. We go out to shopping centres and do some of those experiences as well too. We do things online. So we have about 2,000 kids that will do science experiments and engage with some of our educators and scientists online. Through to things like, running innovation, design thinking type workshops in our National Science Week. So very quick design thinking processes called hackathons. Doing it all online, through to looking at, just getting more and more people engaged with, the science that we are a part of. And I'll put this one up here because very, very passionate about getting more women into STEM. So what we have here is Michelle Simmons, who was awarded the Australian of the Year in 2018. We have Kathy Foley, who has recently in the last year become Australia's Chief Scientist. We've managed to attract both of these very talented women to come and work with one of our very talented women in terms of looking at the magnetism that is inside, the nucleus and how that can be, manipulated to a whole lot of quantum applications through to medical devices, etc. So I guess some of these things here, a lot of people will question, well, is this traditional nuclear science or not? And, probably not, but it opens up doors and allows you to talk about the things that you're wanting to do. And it's all been delivered by a creative mindset, using some design thinking tools and, trying to change the attitude of the team so that they know that they can take some risks, they can do things. We do lots of things in this space that, may not work, but we will quickly change them if that's the case and find out how they do work eventually and usually get very good results. So I think that's got me to the end of my presentation. Any questions at all?
I don't see any questions in the chat. Well, so if the participants want to open their mic and make a question. Let's leverage our speakers.
So I do have a question for you, Mr. Roth.
First of all, I think you have done a wonderful experience at all the ANSTO members working on all those initiatives and even try to come up with different strategies to educate the kids. In terms of the advanced technologies that you were talking about, this survey in the robots and artificial intelligence, how do you see the perspective for the kids or even the parents when they are engaged in these activities, when you talk about new technologies or talking about how to control a sophisticated algorithms, part of the future, the future of the technology?
Yeah, well, I think, we all are operating in advanced technology industries, and there's a lot of fear around artificial intelligence. But we have to learn to live with it. And we have to, I think, of course, needs regulations. That's the role of governments to do. But I encourage anyone, but especially kids or students, to be as heavily involved in this as much as possible, because it's going to, be the tools that they will need through their career. So they might have parents, being fearful of them using these types of things, but it's like any generational change. This is the technology that they're going to need in the future. I mean, the kids aren't worried about this. It's generally the parents. It's generally the older generations. I guess that's just a way of life. But, I think artificial intelligence, used appropriately is going to deliver a lot of benefits for society into the future.
Thank you, Mr. Roth. Alice, over to you.
Yeah, I have a question, and then I think, Emma, you may comment something that it's me on the chat, because I think it was directed to your part. But to Rod, I have a question on the design thinking methodology, because I do use in my day-to-day job. And one of the things that I find challenging sometimes is that people are excited about the solution, and sometimes we are developing solutions looking for problems, and of the other way around. And in the methodology, we dig into what is the problem, empathizing with the user, trying to understand the user journey and so on. But sometimes when we are in this process, people get very excited on the solution, and it's hard to bring them back to the problem. So on your experience, if you could describe a little bit how I
think that's a common problem for anyone doing design thinking. A lot of people automatically think of a solution, and so that's what they want to see adopted. And what you mentioned before is that, you can be coming up with a solution to a problem that doesn't even exist. So you need to continually come back and say, well, what is the actual problem? I mean, we have 3 or 4 different templates that we get people to fill out. One's called the 5 whys. So you just keep on asking why to a question around the problem. You've probably done it before, Alice, by the looks of it. But it's annoying. But, you've just got to keep on doing these things before you actually, feel like you're getting to that root problem. And you start to develop ideas and prototypes, but you've got to come back to that problem, I would say 2 or 3 times as part of the process, just to make sure to give yourself the confidence that you are actually getting to that problem. So when we had that spaghetti ball before with design thinking, it is like that. And so I use the word uncomfortable. I think a lot of people do find it that way. Scientifically trained people get a bit annoyed with the process. It does help if you do have a good facilitator to help with this, but that shouldn't stop you either. You just need to actually set the expectations with anyone that's doing this, is that it's weird, it's not logical, it's creative, it's probably all these things that you're not, but give it a go, because there are ideas there that will come out of the process that you wouldn't think of otherwise.
Thank you. Emma, if you want to comment, I see some comments on the chat related on topic that you covered.
Yes, I'll just read out the comment just in case, and so everyone has heard it and seen it. It says from Emily, regarding Debbie's earlier question, I was wondering if we should think more about shifting the narrative from meeting men where they are and speaking their language to providing men with more strategies to listen and respect women in leadership roles. And then Debbie actually has responded to this because it was her original question. It's a good counter argument. Both ways will create a better working environment for sure, and enable the growth of diverse ideas. I will agree with both of these comments. It's almost that you need both of them. It's not that we need to meet this is more in general for leadership. As a leader, you need to meet your people where they are, and they also need to be able to have the capacity to listen and I will say respect the leadership and push back where pushback is needed, right? They respect you, but they find a way to talk through issues and things of the sort. It kind of does go both ways. And it's creating an environment, as Debbie has mentioned, to make sure you can have those conversations. I will just reflect, a few months ago, I had to lead kind of an ideation workshop that were all men, and I was the lead of this. I was very new in my role here at the Nuclear Energy Agency. Some were more senior than me, some were more junior than me. But as the leader stepping in, I created what a lot of people would call an icebreaker, so they could get to know me and I could get to know them. I could get to know their speaking and learning styles, especially with a multi-generational team. Learn who was that extrovert who was always going to say something. Learn who was that introvert and the one I had to pull and try to get the information out of them. And I had them learn about me and how I liked to take in information, how I like to get the feedback, and then I think Rod also talked about setting the ground rules so that everyone respects everyone, right? So it's not men versus women, it's really people versus people, and respecting your peers, because I've seen a lot of situations where the man is the leader and you have a diverse group and they're still not listened to, right? It's kind of setting that expectation. And as the leader, and we're talking here about women leaders, as a leader, if you set clear expectations and have them kind of learn more about you, a lot of times that's enough to at least have the conversations where that respect is and trust is there. Is there any follow-up, or Rod, would you like to add anything?
Oh, the only thing I'd add to that, Emma, is that I think that situation where you're the only female in a room is very difficult what you can do to assert your control and authority. I think it'd be pretty similar, but a bit different if it was a different diverse scenario. Say one person from, I guess, a nation talking to another group where you're the only person from that nation. But the ideal situation, and I know this is what everyone wants to achieve, is that you just don't have a room full of men to start off with.
I will agree with that. That would be ideal, what we strive for. But I can tell you, yelling at them is not going to help. So anyone, any group, it's just you have to try to lead with understanding and understanding your environment as well.
I've heard from a couple of organisations in Australia as a potential game changer is trying to break down this stereotype that men have to always be in the office. COVID's helped with this as well too, that, that they couldn't play their role in the family because there's no way in the world that they could leave the office at 3 o'clock to get the kids from school. And, you know, there's certain large organisations are now saying, no, you have to go. The expectation is that you go and get the kids 2 or 3 times a week to support their partner, even though they're not in the same organisation, but to try and make that change. And I think, you know, for the men that are working in that organisation, it's actually a relief that they've been encouraged to get out there and be a family member and not be, you know, that old-fashioned model of got to be there 40 hours of the week and, you know, put all the responsibility on their partner. Again, that's got to be driven by the top, though. It's you know, this is, you know, a leader is saying, okay, let's change the absolute culture of our organisation.
So we have one more question for Rod from our YouTube transmission, and then we can pass to the workshop. Do you learn basic radiation knowledge in Australia, elementary, mid, and high schools? And how is the public acceptance and perception of radiation?
People are scared of radiation. They learn it at year 9, so that's when students are 14 or 15. They learn the very basics. We have, I guess, been surprised with the knowledge of the teachers. So we do at least a 1-hour session to up to 1,000 teachers each year. And there's a teacher accreditation process as well too in Australia. So, you know, we're a part of that official training. And yes, the teachers aren't quite aware of all of the different properties of radiation. They have a lot of, you know, misinformation around that as well too. It's one of those things that's, I guess, it's going to take a long time to change. And, you know, even things like, well, the media never help with these. The current example of the tritium water that needs to be released from Fukushima is a great example. I think globally people are concerned about this, even though the levels of tritium are so low that, you know, they're below levels that get released from power plants in other parts of Asia. But because it's got Fukushima and it's got that disaster and it's just got a lot of people worried about it. A lot of people in the Pacific Islands are very worried about it, even though the levels are quite low, and the release of water will go nowhere near their locations. But to answer the question, yeah, so, you know, we don't have bad syllabus links in with schools, but it's just it's a confusing topic. It takes a long time to sort of get someone to understand radiation correctly. And I think that it does get overcomplicated quite a bit as well too. I mean, just the different types of measurements units with radiation was complicated. But if anyone would like to have a look at how we do it, I mean, please reach out. We're actually doing a course for Asian Pacific teachers at the moment, and happy for you to join one of those online courses. It just means, well, actually, it depends on which part of the world you're in. It might mean a late night or very early morning.
Yeah, thank you very much. And we are going to move to the second part of our session. Just wanted to acknowledge Ocean, sorry if I'm butchering your name, but thank you. We appreciate, yeah, if you find and you can send to us, we can take a look and maybe share with the other participants as well. So now I'm going to give back to Emma for the workshop part of the session to explain what the participants are going to be doing.
Sure. I'm going to ask Florencia to help me with this part of this. And I think I guess Florencia, can you help with this part? Here, so the rooms have now been put up there, and I guess you're supposed to choose your room.
Okay, great. So for this second part, based on the presentation that Emma and Rod has been given to all of you, the intention of this activity is to separate the discussion for all the participants, listing the main challenge or develop and innovate in an innovation mindset, and list the benefits and what are, for example, advantages and disadvantages, and what you can recognize at your organization level, or which approaches probably from these takeaway points would you like to implement, or something innovative, right, Emma?
That is correct. Thank you, Florencia. So I think now is the time to click into your chosen breakout room.
Should we quickly just talk about times? So looking at the agenda, we're a little bit late. You want Florencia, everyone to come back and maybe talk about, say, 2 or 3 of the challenges that they've identified?
Yeah, Mr. Rod, I think I'll be working with the time. If the participants can discuss about 20 minutes, list down the challenges in a couple of slides, maybe 1 or 2 slides, depending on the outcome of your discussion. Then we will come back to the room for a brief presentation where the main speakers will be giving you a feedback from what you found. Right, Mr. Rod?
That's correct, yes.
So can you repeat, Florencia, just to make sure everybody understands what they are going to be working on in the groups?
Sure, Alice. So here to all the participants, you'll be separated into the rooms to discuss about the main challenges of developing an innovation mindset. It could be at your organizational level, or some examples that you would like to implement, where you will be able to identify the benefits or some of the examples that were listed by our speakers, or some other ideas that you would like to come up with at your organizational level. You can have this discussion and put some points on the table that will be able, will be helpful for you to identify in other strategies. So I don't know if we have any questions from the participants in this aspect.
There is a question, Olga, about the group. You should have on your Zoom platform something they're saying breakout rooms, or when in my, it's in Spanish, so you say salas. So you can click on there and you're going to find group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. And you're going to select the one that is your group number based on what was sent to you in the document that was sent to you last week.
So,
I see people starting to join.
Okay. So Alice, if you can use close for stopping the transmission on YouTube, just to wrap up.
If the remaining participants are having any difficulty to join, let us know.